Hello and welcome to the Morningscape podcast. I am Matt Moody, joined by DJ Mitchell. Fresh off, busy couple months in the NHL, but no podcast. So DJ, how you doing? Checking back in on Tuesday, June 25th.
Yeah, I felt like we talked about doing a show like 7 times and then never did it and just been really busy. Honestly, I haven't been in Buffalo for a weekend in like a month and a half, and I'm leaving again for 10 days here. So yeah, just been busy. I'm excited to get back into it and get to every Sabres fan favorite part of the year. That is the off season, of course, where Sabres can actually do something. So how have you been?
Yeah, been good. Can't really complain. Just doing shows during the playoffs is just it's just not fun because there's so few games, and frankly the strategy that I tend to deploy is, did it work last game? No. Okay, try it again. Like, I mean, that's just kind of how the series work, especially when earlier in the playoffs there's like 3 game slates or whatever, 2 gamers, and there's just so few options. It's just not that fun to talk about.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I
I
know
mean,
you're out here tweeting your
honestly, I think
bets
the
and
perfect
whatnot.
yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. No, I was gonna say
No,
that the
no, I was
perfect
just gonna say
encapsulation of
betting.
it.
We're hot. We're hot. It just it's not fun. That's basically what I'm trying to say. It's not fun talking to you, DJ. But in reality, I just know that people are less interested, in the gambling stuff when it comes to the playoffs, which is ironic because the playoffs in general are what casuals tend to like. But I just don't think the casuals are finding the Moinsky podcast. Um,
No,
so yeah, it doesn't really make sense for us. Anyway.
yeah, yeah. What I was gonna say now, before I was so rudely interrupted. Can I talk? It's my turn. And that's the show, folks. No, I really felt like just like the constant media from so many people got it to a point of glorifying Gustav Forsling to like the best player in the playoffs, and he ended up receiving Conn Smythe votes, which we will get to. But again, I just feel like it just gets out of hand. Like you do a show every day and you try to dissect things every single day. I feel like you're going to end up making some really bad assumptions, which is what happens to a lot of NHL teams that end up making horrific signings after some playoff performances, and that's happened in the past. So now that the Barkley Gaudreau conversation's already out of the way, why don't you get us started with our sponsor?
Yeah, it's been a while since we have, recorded a podcast. It's been so long, actually, that apparently the Hockey Podcast Network is now partnered with Manscaped. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to announce that Smooth Sack Summer is officially upon us. When you're playing in the summer sun, make sure you're groomed from pubes to bum. Thanks to our friends at Manscaped, you can make this season your smoothest yet. The Performance Package 5.0 Ultra is the ultimate bundle to keep your boys downstairs cool while looking hot. Speaking of looking hot, this Florida Panthers jersey, if you're on the YouTube, got a Samson jersey last year, coming in handy, so I'm looking good as we head into the summer. Join the 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped for our exclusive offer. Get 20% off and free shipping when you go to manscaped.com and use code THPN, the Hockey Podcast Network, THPN. Summertime and the trimming is easy. DJ, I mean, I know you and, lots of listeners out there, like, it's just not fun, when it's just hot out. You gotta stay fresh down there. So that's really all I gotta say. Like, I'm contractually obligated to talk about that. Um, but
I
I actually
yeah.
do still wear the boxers, that because I did this a year or two ago, and I still wear the boxers. The boxers that they send you are perfectly comfortable too. So but that's pretty fun.
Yeah, I've owned a Manscaped instrument before, and I just lost it when I moved once, but it worked really well. I don't know. I was mad I lost it. I don't know where it
Yeah.
went. I like to think maybe someone stole it. It was so good, and that's what I'm going to go with. Is that they're so good that your roommate will steal it, even though they know where it's been. Is there anything else to this ad read, or
um, no, I don't think so. If I miss anything, maybe I'll get yelled at, or maybe I'll just go on obliviously unaware for the rest of time. But yeah,
That's
seriously,
good.
Manscaped is like actually we are users of it, so I
Oh, they're good.
suppose this isn't the worst partner in the world. Um,
No,
but
no, it's
we do,
awkward to talk about, but yeah.
I feel like it's less awkward for people who just are cooler than we are, like we're just kind of like these dweebs that sit here and talk about like the fantasy men. We literally
Yeah.
fantasize about hockey players. Like, come on.
For the audio listener, while you were doing that read and not paying attention, I totally did a magic trick. I'm not even gonna lie. I was laughing at myself. I'm on mute. But then I dropped the quarter. So while you're calling me a dweeb, I would also like to add that I totally did a magic trick. So check out the YouTube, click subscribe while you're there if you want to check
Oh boy.
me do. But you can't hear it, but it actually worked the first time. And then I tried to like do it again. And I totally dropped it. And I was like, whatever. I did it once. I was just gonna do that while you were reading the script, and I could watch your eyes following it. And I'm like, he's not watching me at all. This seems really funny to me. And I was on mute. Okay. Now we were going to get back into things by talking about the most
No,
important news of yesterday. Okay. I'm sorry. I'll pause quick. I think I have
no,
to go on.
I was just gonna say that I feel like we've done Manscaped more than the time required of us. So thank you to Manscaped for helping sponsor this show. Yeah, as far as what else we're gonna talk about, DJ, have at it.
Yeah. Most important thing to happen on Monday night, or Monday really in general, was Mateev Michkov will be coming over from Russia. That was what I remember as an Oilers better. That was my favorite part of the Monday news cycle. So that actually really is pretty cool. It was not expected to happen this early, and certainly with that, leading up to the Cup, and of course other things that we're going to get to that also happened before the Cup started. It kind of already kickstarted the betting cycle. Someone sent it over to me. Um, that Michkov is at 46.5 over under on points. Of course, the Discord was started right away on that because it seems low, but then again, it's Torts, it's a bunch of stuff. But yeah, we're already going to be getting some bets out there, and it's really exciting, and we're definitely going to break down a lot of it. But any thoughts on Michkov in general before we get into the Cup final?
Well, DJ, funny you should mention his betting prop line because, boy, do I have another sponsor for you. So let me just get this out of the way while we're on the topic. The chase for the Stanley Cup has concluded. I didn't get a new ad read actually, so maybe I'm not supposed to read this today. The action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL, is just as hot as it is on the ice with same game parlays, live betting, odds boosts, Matvey Michkov season-long props. I got you there, DraftKings. Don't miss out as the Stanley Cup playoffs wind down. Well, I guess you already missed out there, but there's a lot more to not miss out on. If you are new to DraftKings, you got to check this out. New customers bet $5 get 150 in bonus bets. Looks like I gotta update the bottom. DJ, update that bottom ticker while we're live, please. Call to action. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers. Get 150 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Or in West Virginia, visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available from problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas. 21 plus, age varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. See dkng.com/ice for eligibility and deposit restrictions, terms, and responsible gaming resources. Copyright NHL 2024. All rights reserved. Okay. Now that we've got all the ads out of the way, thank you to DraftKings. And again, thank you to Manscaped for sponsoring this. We are going to talk about things that are particularly relevant for next season, presumably. We'll cover some of the off-season stuff that we're looking at, that we're watching for, that we want to see happen. And we will also talk about our darlings, the former Buffalo Sabres, do it again. Second year in a row for upstate New York, just absolutely vibing out here. Sam Reinhart, Brandon Montour, just, the Kings have come to roost. Jack Eichel last year. I'm about as happy as you could be as someone who got, kind of punished throughout the NHL season and the NHL playoffs. gambling wise. It's been 2 good years of having players that I like win Stanley Cups. So DJ, how you feeling about this couple months?
Yeah, I mean, it's just another perfect example of what I rationally would have liked to have seen happen did happen. But of course, I, as did many, bet the Oilers to win the cup before the playoffs started. So I'm punished, didn't cash out. I never really think that's a good idea to cash out bets of that, really at any time. But when you get down to it, it's basically a pick 'em to win, double or more of what they were offering me. So I wasn't going to put down more money to potentially, whatever. So I held the ticket. I lost. The playoffs are pretty like back and forth. I had a couple pretty big hits in there. Kind of cooled off in the cup final. Few longer odds bets hit. I had a couple nights where I lost the DFS slate on empty netter. That was frustrating. Yeah, I don't know. Just it was what it was. I kind of feel like after everything, the entire playoffs, I basically ended up around the break-even point, maybe up a little bit of money. Best puck didn't get there. I had a couple teams that really could have fought for first in the finals. I had some really big Edmonton, Florida stacks, and they just didn't make it. My only team I had two teams that made the finals, but the only one that had any chance was a full-on six-man Edmonton onslaught. Didn't get there. RNH, outscored by Bennett and Darnell Nurse and all these other guys. So disappointing in the respect that I didn't end up, changing, I guess, my bankroll by much, if any at all. But on the same token, it was pretty successful. I advanced a ton of teams in Best Puck overall and had a ton of teams that, had a chance. So I'm not mad about anything, but ready to move on to, next year. And we can talk a little bit more about the cup, but anything you wanted to add to those notes?
Gosh, on the season, yeah, there's a lot that we could unpack. I don't think this is a time for me to complain about various losses. I'm going to spend a ton of time this summer on the best puck data. I've been putting in the Discord some of my advances. You're talking to someone who, yes, I have our code that Doug wrote for me, but I've never originated anything, and I've actually managed to do a fair amount with the best puck data so far, in addition to the Excel stuff that I've already shared and we've talked about for both last year and now this year's data that was provided to us. So there's going to be a lot of that coming out. Mike Leone's best ball manifesto dropped over on ETR yesterday. At least part one did. So those are full of ideas that I plan to at least look at in some respects. Just as far as, devising how to test hypotheses and whatnot. There's a sacrilegious best ball data bowl from last year, like his submission to that I want to recreate for the NHL because I think it's particularly relevant. But those things are coming down the line. Not the time or the place to go deep on those. But just know that, if you like the Underdog product or if you've yet to try it out, I think this will be one of the only places talking about how to actually gain a tangible edge. I'm not sure whether I want to do written content or videos about them. So we'll see. But if you have any thoughts on how you like to get your, I guess, best ball content, let me know because I can be pretty flexible to both, whether it's me droning on for an hour about, various things with screen sharing or whether you prefer seeing things written up. That's really the only thing I'll fish for here as far as getting interaction with the audience. But yeah, that's my summer plan. Other summer plans, maybe some hockey teams planning to do some nonsense. DJ, have we seen any nonsense? Maybe in the last, 12 hours already? Take foot?
Yeah, of course we have. I mean, right before the cup final, and again, I really don't have a ton of thoughts. I mean, there's plenty of people talking about what occurred in the finals and how the games went and everything. I mean, one of the best series in my lifetime. Definitely, I was absolutely on pins and needles for Game 7. I don't have anything really to add to any of the discourse. Everything kind of just worked out fine. I don't know. But right before, there was rumors of this potential Olmark trade, and I kept seeing the return is, awful. It's really bad. It's this, that's the other thing. And yeah, I mean, it definitely left something to be desired. I will always wonder what the Kings offered. I guess before the deadline, I have to assume it was more, but had to be more than that. And Omar didn't take it. I do think he amended to go to Ottawa, but at the end of the day, yeah, Boston not looking great in that deal. Any thoughts? Again, I don't know. It's hard. Goalies are so weird that it's hard for me to really like. I guess I'm going to give Ottawa the win no matter what here, and I'm going to say that Omar is just more valuable than what they traded, and it just seems everything about it seems weird, but it didn't seem like there was a promise of a re-sign, and that would be really where I guess you could draw the conclusion of, what NHL teams that have the cap to get him where he wants to get are also going to have the assets to. It seems kind of like a mess. So at the end of the day, I think if you're a Boston fan, you kind of have a reason to be upset about what happened for every reason. But man, that's tough to kind of just get strong-armed away from maybe the best return. I don't know. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was surprised that Ottawa only had to give up what they gave up. That I think that a lot of us were expecting Ottawa to be desperate in their search for a goalie and to sort of get fleeced as a result. Sitting on it, with the contract and everything, I guess getting a late first isn't the end of the world. I do wonder though, because taking on who the hell did he take on? Kastelich and Korpisalo, taking on that deal,
Korpisalo.
it doesn't give them a ton of flexibility still. So it doesn't seem like it's what they needed to do. I wonder if they have another rookie goalie that they're going to call up to be their backup, or whether Korpisalo is actually going to be the guy. Because if it's going to be Korpisalo, that's, I don't know. It's kind of a risk. So it was an interesting trade. Not really sure how much else we need to really dive deep on it though, because there's been a ton of trades even in the last 48 hours.
Yeah, I mean, I hinted at the Barclay Goodrow one as well, which isn't as much a trade as it was a signing that I absolutely didn't expect. Barclay Goodrow signs or gets waived by the Rangers and goes over to the Sharks, which kind of felt like a head scratcher. But yeah, I guess you can kind of make some sort of they need to fill a roster. He is at least an NHL player, and they kind of got to get to a minimum cap. Did seem like they did the Rangers quite a favor by doing that for nothing, but I don't know. Maybe there's more to that than meets the eye. Maybe there's something else that's going to happen. I saw, rumors of that, but I don't know. Any thought on that one, or just not much? I mean, I think I summed it up.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense why the Sharks did it, in my opinion. Like you said, they need NHL players, and he's not great, but he's certainly an NHL player. It was sort of interesting to see it come out. I think the San Jose beat writers had it that Mike Greer basically had to address the fact that Barclay Goodrow had the Sharks on his no trade list, and so when he got waived, that was obviously a factor in whether he was going to actually show up to camp or not. And it sounds like Greer thinks he would show up to training camp and whatnot. But that was a somewhat interesting situation for those who might not remember. Barclay Goodrow was on the Sharks for seven years or so, bouncing up and down between the AHL and NHL before finally sort of settling in toward the end of the Sharks' good run as a third, fourth liner. Then he got traded to Tampa, which is where he sort of took off, as that playoff producer. But so he has spent a lot of time in San Jose, had them on his no trade list, and was, displeased to be claimed, I suppose, is the story there. So just a little bit of percolating drama, but honestly, I think it's more impactful that Logan Couture might be back next year. We'll see. Kind of seemed like it was the end for him, but that's enough Sharks talk out of us. Oh wait.
Moving on to I mean, they did trade for Ty Dellandrea, fourth round pick for Ty Dellandrea. I was going to get to that, but that's fine. You don't want to talk about Ty Dellandrea? You got a problem with
Ty
DJ.
Dellandrea? What thoughts do you have on Mr. Ty Dellandrea?
I think he's a good bet by them, honestly. A 23-year-old that definitely seems to have finishing touch, and it kind of feels like they have a lot of Ty Dellandrea. That was sort of my thought. It's like, how many guys do you need that are kind of like this? I don't know, but What were you gonna? I mean, is it that they basically said they're taking Celebrini? I mean, what is missing here?
No, I was gonna say the Jake Wallman trade.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. I mean, there's an order of operations here. We have to go in order of the trades. But yeah, you're right. The Jake Wallman trade. But I'm going to go for the Markstrom trade first because we're going chronologically. You see, although we've
Oh,
already
we're
gone out of
talking about the
order pretty
Sharks.
bad because that happened before the cup. All right, fine. Let's talk about the Jake Wallman trade. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Shocked, but also I am the noted Jake Wallman hater of the world. Remember?
You
And
know
then
what
I
I
said I
couldn't
was his
believe?
biggest fan.
Yeah, I do remember that.
I don't.
He's 28. I had no idea. Like, I know, obviously, I look at
Yeah.
the calendar. I'm like, oh wait, I'm that old. I'm 29, I think. Yeah, 29. Anyway, so that was a bit of a surprise, but look at the end of the day, looking at his contract, like looking how he like, it's weird that Detroit would want to move him. Like, it seemed, but like the fact that they did, I guess, isn't that surprising. Like Simon Edvinsson has to play in the NHL next year. I mean, it's completely ridiculous that he didn't last year, in my opinion. And obviously Ben Sherratt is the problem there. But like when your GM goes out and signs guys like Andrew Kopp and JD Compher and Ben Sherratt for way too much money, you're gonna have to pay the piper at some point. So like it makes sense that they had to pay a pick to unload a contract that they didn't want anymore because their GM is actually not very good at this. It seems pretty obvious to me at this point that like he was not the reason Tampa was very good, believe it or not. But yeah,
we
just a
are
strange situation.
absolutely putting him on fraud watch. It kind of just felt like every signing they had too, every fan base kind of looked at like they must know something we don't know because Steve Yzerman is too smart to do something stupid. And then after like the seventh time we said this, I think everyone's now starting to be like, I don't know. I cannot believe there wasn't a buyer in the market that would have given an asset. I mean, maybe I don't know Jake Wallman as well as I thought I did. And I was the one that was like, are you freaking kidding me when he's a better rated fantasy asset on ESPN than Brent Burns? But I don't think he was worth trading a second round pick just to move 3.4 million. It's like you kind of alluded to, it expires when he turns 30 or 31. I don't know if this makes Mario Ferraro more available if you're the Sharks, who is a 25-year-old on a similar contract. Maybe that's part of this too, that they get an asset, they get a player that they can work with, and obviously is, people know Jake Wallman because of what, his celebrations and whatnot, and they're going to need all they can get this year because they're not going to be a very good team. I don't know everything that goes into it, but I was surprised. I thought I read it wrong. I just kept thinking like Jake Wallman and a second round pick.
Mm-hmm.
No,
Yeah,
they
I
mean
mean,
4, and that would have been a lot
yeah,
to pay. But like, still, I mean, I would think they could get like a 6 for him. Just why not? But well, whatever.
yep. And it's not like they're behind most Slater. Their defense right now is Ben Sherratt, Justin Hall, Oli Mata, and Jeff Petrie. Petrie and Mata each have 1 year left. They're all veterans at this point. Mata's the youngest at 29, Hall's 32, and the other guys are older than that. So it is time to sort of get these young guys in, and maybe you just simply couldn't move. Chirot, Hall, Petrie all have no trade clauses. So maybe those lists that they have didn't work out. Maybe you didn't want to move Oli Mata for whatever reason, instead. So out the door, Wallman goes, whatever. But the reason that's important is, definitely Sandine Pellikka and Edvinsson are right there. Maybe Sandine Pellikka is only 19, but he's got a ton of pedigree. They have Shai Buam, William Olinder. Those are two guys who I've definitely heard of. I don't have the full prospect backing, but I do feel like it has something to do with that, where they were just looking at their team and they're like, we gotta play these young guys, and that was the only way to do it. But yeah, pretty interesting. Jake Markstrom.
Yeah, I mean, I was on the. I believe I was on the. Yeah, I think I was on the golf course when that tree. Yeah, I was. I was out with a bunch of. Because I remember like with a guy that likes hockey a lot, and we were just like, holy crap, Markstrom, the Devils. I mean, what Markstrom for Ball, a first round pick in 2025. I felt like that was I don't want to say an overpay, but he is getting older. The contract isn't bad. He's 4.125 for 2 years. Devils can afford it. I think that whatever was going on with the Devils, they decided they had to just completely cut and run. I mean, Markstrom and Jake Allen, I think that's a much better tandem to go into next year with. I mean, I don't know what happened to Akira Schmid, but he fell off the face of the earth. I think he started to figure out in the AHL, but honestly, I don't know too much about what went on there. I think it's just it's one of those deals where it's like, it's kind of tomorrow's problem. Like, it's not this year's first, it's next year's. And if they're so bad that that's a valuable pick, whoever the GM is, what's his name? I'm totally. They already.
Tom Fitzgerald. No, Tom Fitzgerald is their GM. Yeah.
Still okay. So I was going to be right then. Yeah, he's gone. If they miss the playoffs, he is gone. It is not his problem. That is what I was going to say, and then I stopped myself to double check. I am correct in that assessment. So that is how NHL GMs work. But I don't think it's a bad deal. It's not like he's completely screwing the next guy by giving him a better goalie than they previously had. So sure, not all that much to it. The Flames are kind of going to suck. I am probably going to be a bit higher on them than the market, but man, it doesn't look overtly promising.
Yeah.
Overtly.
Yeah. I was not surprised. That's been the obvious. That the trade, the two partners. That's been rumored for a while. So really not much to add there, other than that this is obviously a prove it year for New Jersey, with Sheldon Keefe and Markstrom coming in to be like, yeah, this is the core that can get the job done, and make a deep playoff run. So we'll see what happens. But I gotta say, we've covered a lot of transactions, a lot of nonsense. No trade was as surprising as a 1-for-1 deal of Darcy Kemper for Pierre-Luc Dubois. I mean,
I was certain you were going to say Adam Beckman for Graham Clark, but okay.
No,
I guess you don't care about Adam Beckman anymore.
Yeah, believe it or not, the team with Alex Holtz, I don't anticipate using Adam Beckman in any sort of intelligent way, because
that's not me. I thought while we were already on the Devils, I assumed we were going to talk about.
Okay. You know what?
Yeah, let's get to the.
You are better at this than I am, but I did want to just keep the ball rolling, so I just jumped to what I thought was the last trade. But you're right. I should have mentioned it.
That joke had to be made. That had to be made. You can't do that and not let me get back at it. I mean, come on. That's textbook execution. The audio listener has been fully serviced. Now back to Pierre-Luc Dubois and Darcy Kemper, 1-for-1. Was there not a little retention or no retention? I'm trying to remember now.
Nothing. No.
Nothing.
Straight up nothing. 1-for-1.
Okay. I will reserve my thoughts. I will let you go first.
It is unbelievable that Pierre-Luc Dubois has so little value. Darcy Kemper completely lost the net last year for the worst playoff team in the league, and arguably a team that was worse than 5 or 6 teams that didn't even make the playoffs. And he straight up lost the net, and he is old, and he is not signed on a good contract. And that is all you could get. I mean, it's not even all you could get. You got nothing for Pierre-Luc Dubois, who you just gave up Gabe Vilardi for last summer, when we, the smart people in the room, said, well, maybe you shouldn't trade the best player in a deal with other stuff to get another player. Turns out the smart people in the room were very right. Gabe Vilardi is definitely better than Pierre-Luc Dubois. But just in general, nobody could possibly be lower on Pierre-Luc Dubois than the NHL. Fantasy next year, he might not even get drafted in Betspuck, and he is going to be the number 1 center. Maybe Dylan Strome holds on to that role, but I truly do not think that Pierre-Luc Dubois is, he's going to be someone that I'm, sitting there with 19% exposure to in Betspuck, and it's going to be like, well, how do you not take him when he's 160 and all these other dudes are third liners? And, then you'll look at me and be like, well, he's a third liner. And I'm going to be like, no, he's going to play with Ovi. And maybe that never happens, but it's just truly astonishing, like what has transpired over the past year for Pierre-Luc Dubois. So, yeah, what are your thoughts?
I mean, the first thing, because this trade gets goes out and all this stuff going on, and I see a tweet that I maybe it was Chris John. I'm not even going to quote myself on it. It was one of those guys, those insider, and they were just like applauding Rob Blake, like he made a mistake, he owned up to it, he got out of it, this that, and I'm just sitting here like. No, like this is so incredibly bad. Like he took a bad situation that he already messed up and then messed up again because you give up on this guy at his absolute lowest, and in reality, they got less than nothing. Like you're saying, I get that
Mm-hmm.
maybe Kemper bounces back to being like it's such a good team in front of. I truly believe this Kings team is awesome. Like I think it's a really good team still, and like it might make him usable enough to where you're literally not playing, like Phoenix Copley. But it's still just atrocious. And I remember because again, when the trade, let's go back in time. I'm going to give you props. You were definitely much more adamant. Like I agreed with you that the trade was bad originally when they traded Velarde and stuff because I love Velarde as well. But you were so adamant about it, and I was like, listen, like he has so much skill. He has so much talent. Maybe he gets into this room and things work out better. They signed the contract, and I'm like, I don't know how that contract's going to pay off, but you know what? Like, he does have a lot of talent, and yeah, it absolutely imploded on them. I don't really like how much people just seem to want to like just bury the guy while he's down. I agree with you that there is probably a good buying point there in fantasy because people are going to be just completely off of him, just almost universally entirely. And yeah, I mean, there is still a lot of talent in the right situation and a lot of motivation for a guy that, let's not forget, is 26 years old. I don't know. I mean, I'm not completely giving up on him. It's a terrible contract, but when you're the Washington Capitals and you're likely going to stink, I think for the next 5 or 6 years, you don't have a lot of prospects coming through. You might as well take a reclamation project, and if it somehow works out, and you end up, keeping this winning pedigree, which I mean, back-to-back wins for their AHL team, they continue to find ways to sneak into the playoffs, even though when they're atrocious. I know they got swept, but whatever. I don't know. Maybe you give Ovi a couple more chances just to at least be relevant and make you guys some money. So I don't really see how it's other than keeping that contract on file, but eventually you can buy it out. Yeah, I think it's a win for the Capitals, no matter any way you look at it. And it seemed like everyone else was ready to just go the other way entirely. This is still one of the better players. I mean, again, like, am I stupid in saying that last year people were applauding the LA Kings? Like, am I wrong in saying that? Like, maybe not
Yeah,
as
no,
much as I remember, but like,
it
it seemed like
it
people were
was
pretty much in on it.
yeah. So I mean, just a step back in the time machine. This was before Quentin Byfield broke out. So this was them basically
Yeah,
securing their their number one center in a post Anze Kopitar world where Phil Deneau could remain the number two
yeah,
center, the defensive shutdown type guy. And then when Kopitar was no longer able to fulfill those duties, Pierre-Luc Dubois would be the number one center, centering Kempe and Fiala and whoever else they wanted to go with. That failed spectacularly, of course, but that is what was the general narrative out around. And not to say I lost a lot of money on Pierre-Luc Dubois this year. I lost some money. I lost a lot of money on a lot of players this year, I guess. But Pierre-Luc Dubois was someone
yeah,
who, as soon as his value sort of cratered, like I was kind of like, yeah, let me buy on this because I don't think he's a bad player. Like I think he's a perfectly
yeah.
fine, like like perfectly competent offensive forward. So this feels like the perfect opportunity for me to double down and still lose while being perfectly correct on everything to do with Pierre-Luc Dubois. And that last year's trade was dumb. This year's trade from the Kings' perspective was maybe even dumber. And
Yep.
and still seeing him in Washington, there's a chance he plays the wing with Ovi and Strom, and like that would be that
That
would
would
be a
be,
lot of
yeah,
fun. I
that.
gotta say, because they
Now
have
you're
Connor
talking. I mean,
McMichael,
yeah,
they have Hendrix Lapierre. Like they have young guys at the center position where maybe they can sort of cushion him a bit easier. Take the reins from Tom Wilson. TJ Oshie. These guys who are getting up there. Um, I'm really interested to see how this plays out.
100%. I mean, Yeah, I don't even know if there's again, like the only comparable situation, in my opinion, to how bad Rob Blake did is kind of the Tom Fitzgerald on the other side. Both of them leading to coaches getting fired, both of them leading to a lot of turnover in different ways. But in reality, I mean, it's purely Dubois. Defensively, it has been a nightmare, and he has compete level has been bad. I don't know. I mean, I'm willing to bet on that I'm willing to bet on the talent again, even though I think the original trade was terrible. I think this one is not a bad bet for the Washington Capitals. So
All right.
I think that's the most interesting trade for sure. So yeah, why don't we move it along to the next topic? Where are we at? 30 minutes? 35 minutes?
Yeah.
You ready?
So the
The
draft's coming
draft?
up. Yeah. So I will say from my perspective, the draft, the players that are in this year's draft class, I know relatively little about, and that's because I try to look at things from a fantasy lens. Frankly, I don't care how good defensively, Cole Eiserman is or whoever, but I care about, will they be a fantasy relevant player, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years down the line, and what does their ceiling look like? And so from that, I do a lot of shots and point generation type comparisons, and that is using pick224.com data, which is a wonderful website, but it goes dark until after the draft at some point because the guy's been contracted by by an NHL team, and basically he takes the site down from May to June because he doesn't want teams to steal his data, basically. Which, whatever, that's his right. But as a result, I frankly didn't pull any of the season long data for any of these guys, so I know nothing. The one thought I have is about Chicago's the weird trade they made like a month ago, but I don't think anyone actually cares about them trading for the 18th pick instead of the 20th pick or whatever the hell it was, and like giving up a full second in the for that, right? So DJ, hit us with how you see the draft unfolding.
Sure. So yeah, I made a mock draft. I mean, do you want me to pull it up? I'll probably pull it up.
Yeah, go for it.
All right, hold on 1 second. Let me share.
And while you're doing that, I should say we are, of course, live over on YouTube. Not live. This video is live on YouTube when you're listening to this on the podcast.
Yeah. Zoom in just a little bit to get rid of some of the ads that are still kind of there. Yeah, I mean, again, I'm not an expert in any of this stuff, and you can certainly go to plenty of people that probably have more insight than I do. But let's just go right through it. I mean, number one, without a doubt, not even offered on the sports books or anything of that nature, is Macklin Celebrini. He'll be a San Jose Shark. It's a foregone conclusion. Number two, I mean, with Chicago, it does, this is kind of a pick that's starting to become more contested. But everyone kind of seems on the same page that it will be Levchinov. I don't even know if I'm saying his name completely accurately, but Artem Levchinov, I kind of feel like the chatter and the betting market that shifted in that capacity, like shifted as much as it did, just has led me to kind of just go with it. The Ivan Demidov situation has changed a little bit on people. People, I think, are committed to him being a top 5 pick now for sure, with his height and being in America for everything right now. And Michkov helps all these Russians, in my opinion, because there's a ton of talent over there. And while it definitely took a hit by everything going on, and that's been documented by, 32 Thoughts and other podcasts talking about how, some of these restrictions and some of these, war obligations have cratered some of their prospect pedigree and ability to play as much as they could have and stuff of that nature. But this is a truly special talent, and I just can't see with how it's becoming easier and easier for these players to come over and get in these systems at a younger age. It's not going to lead to him being a top 5 pick. I think the Ducks take a stab on him. They have the time, they have players that can play now, and they have players coming through the system. I think it's a perfect home for him. The question is, are they a little bit too into getting a defenseman with the need that exists there? So I think this could be an easy swap of Demidov and Filiev. I could go either way on it, but I'm going to stick with what I have here now. I think that they're probably the top 4 prospects, though, with Caden Lindstrom right there as well. And I've seen him mocked as close. I think I've seen him at 3, but I think he's come down a bit. I'll stop there. I think that top 5 is pretty cemented, in my opinion, though.
Yeah, I think that's all pretty much. Yeah, I think I agree with all of that. Just thinking about uh, the, the the Chicago pick first. What is interesting about Chicago is that they are a team that has no Russians in their system, like whatsoever. They have Nikita Zaitsev on their team, but otherwise, they don't draft Russians. They don't really, obviously they've only traded for Zaitsev and actually Zaitsev's a UFA after this year. So, they have no
Yeah,
Russians on their team in their system. And I think what they're going to do is they're going to take a Russian at 18 as well. And just basically, obviously Levshinov has a bit more exposure to the US because he's been over since I think he
yeah.
was 16,
Michigan. He
playing in
played
the
at Michigan
USHL and
State.
then in
Yeah.
college. Yeah. Um,
Mhm.
but there is a language barrier that exists with these guys, and so them actually making that trade from 20 up to 18 gets them into the range of a couple Russians, I believe. Yeah, you have
Yeah.
Chernyshov
I
or
had him
whatever,
going.
and
Yeah,
so I
I
think
had
there
him
was
going
a
next actually,
chance.
but I agree with that narrative. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think there was a chance that they saw the draft board and they were like, "Well, there's a chance we might not get another compatible Russian." I would still not be surprised if they took Demidov, to be honest, especially with the Michkov, latest. I haven't seen the latest like Bovado lines or whatever, but I don't think it's like minus 10,000 on like a defenseman or Levshinov
No.
specifically or anything like that. So but in either case, I do think that they go, Russian, if that's somehow something you can bet on. That is an interesting angle because there's a lot of, pieces out there about teams that have drafted Russians about how useful it is, especially in today's climate, to like have them sort of insulated, and going with other players that sort of share their experiences, be it language and, cultural barriers. So I don't know. I find that situation incredibly interesting. As far as the Ducks, I think Silyov fits their mold perfectly. They have,
Yeah.
or actually, it's Saleyev. I don't know. I'm just saying random things.
Saleyev. Yeah.
Anton
Saleyev.
Saleyev. He's an incredible player to watch. Like, just find some clips of him. He's a ton of fun. But
Yep.
they have the Menchikov and they have Zellweger. Like they need, that sort of next wave of like a shutdown guy, and that is what the peak of Silev looks like. They could go Davidov for sure, but I think with Carter Gauthier, like their star caliber forward is ideally set. And so I would not be surprised to see them go with Salayev personally. But yeah,
Yeah.
anything
I think
else in your
it's
draft that
I
you thought was interesting?
I'm really high on William. I think he is. I like him just as much as any of these defensemen in this class, and I think I'm going to be the highest at him going 6 to Utah. Um,
Do
I'm not
you
sure if there's anything to maybe. Mhm.
Do you think any of the defensemen
What?
being drafted this year play in the NHL next year? Because Utah's a team where you could
Um.
definitely see that.
Well, I mean, he's at University of Denver. They just won the national championship. I bet the plan is to let him go back and for him to come out at the end of the year. Um, I think he's one of the most dynamic players in the draft for any position. Like I think he is. I think his pedigree. I don't know what it is that is keeping him a little bit lower than maybe he should. Like I don't understand why he's a grade below Saleyev and Levashinov. Like I don't understand why it feels like that distinction's been made. Like I have him in the same class. This top six really, in my opinion, is the top six. Like I put him right up there with the rest of them. So I don't think he comes out. I think the only one is I don't honestly I don't know if any of them come out. Like I think it's that barrier to get into the NHL as a defenseman out of college or another league is just too high. Saleyev was in the KHL last year, so I again be very very
Yeah,
surprised if he somehow
he's
comes over and stays. So like
he, he's
no,
signed
I think
until
it's
he's
really
20.
only Celebrini. Like Celebrini seems
Yeah,
like the only one that's obviously 100%, and then everyone else I'd be pretty surprised. I mean at the end of the day, like Buium is right up there with the most NHL ready. I think most would argue Levashinov, but both probably I think could probably go back to college and finish the year and then come out. Both on obviously great programs that both made the final 8 last year before Michigan State went out to Michigan. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there could be a guy later on that could be, your
Yeah.
Zach Benson of last
And
year. There's a
so,
couple guys that fit that mold as well, but
yes, and for context, 4 guys last year in last year's draft played in the NHL, between Bedard, Carlson, Fantilli, and Zach Benson. Like, 4 guys made the NHL
yeah.
basically right out of camp last year. So, to have only one in this year's draft, I feel like would be interesting, but I
Yeah.
don't know who that second or third option would be. So, yeah, just an
I mean,
interesting thought
Caden
experiment,
Lindstrom
especially if,
has, the size, 6'3",
yeah,
210. Like, he's a bigger guy. So people will probably look to him as well. And I do think he's a top
yeah,
5 pick. And Montreal could certainly use a center that can play, and it's kind of been a bit of their MO with others to
yeah.
rush them into the NHL. So I wouldn't
I
be
feel like they're
shocked.
scarred.
Um,
Um,
Yeah, maybe. I mean, again, maybe they're scarred, but it's certainly. I mean, this guy, he had some injury problems last year, but 46 points in 32 games, 27 of those were goals. Like, he could score from anywhere, and he certainly has an NHL shot. So they could really need it. I don't know who their number 2 center is. That's something we were kind of talking about off air recently. It's like
mhm.
they're a team that could definitely be in the market for one of these wingers. They have assets. Well, who's going to play second line center for them? And it's probably not Caden Lindstrom
Yeah,
right now, but man, could you surround him with talent and can you start to get him in there? Like, he seems like the obvious second guy on this list because it's, defenseman. Dimidev is ready, but not going to get there. He just seems like the obvious guy. When again, I think it's incredibly difficult at 18 or 19 to come over and play defense successfully in the NHL. We've seen it time and time again with really every NHL defenseman that comes over right away. Dahlin and Hedman even struggled out the gate for sure. Owen Power
yeah.
certainly struggled out the gate. He stayed in college trial. So I'd be
My
pretty surprised if any of them do. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess my feedback there is that I believe Kirby Doc should be good to go to start the year. And then
Yeah.
beyond that, even Alex Newhook, I think, showed enough that he can play center at the NHL level. And they also didn't have Christian Dvorak for a large chunk of last year. So I do feel like he's a little bit blocked if he wants to come in as a center. Now, obviously, teams tend to bring guys in like that as a wing anyway. Um, but yeah, the spot that's really interesting to me is Utah because, this is obviously a bit of a fantasy, but if they somehow don't sign Sean Dursey, if they deal him somewhere else, I mean, that is a completely wide open blue line. And if one of these, defensemen is NHL ready, that is the spot where if they take a defenseman, they could step in and be actually fantasy relevant from, day one, from minute one of, being in the NHL. So I'm highly interested in following that situation as it unfolds.
Yeah.
Anything else from the draft?
I mean, one thing, that my top 10 has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 defensemen in the top 10. And I think that's, of all of them, I think William, honestly, I feel like he's going to be the most fantasy relevant of the lot. But then second is, Zane Park. I guess this guy was, I mean, just like, again, you want to pull up highlights. This guy had 96 points in 66 games. Just absolutely electric. But I think there's a bit more concern on the defensive side. So again, he's probably not going to come over right away. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know if any of these guys do. The players that, for fantasy relevance, down at 12, Berkeley Catton, that feels like your Cole Caulfield-esque talent. Your, Zach Benson-esque of a player again. Like, he's going to probably slip just because of how much need there is for these defensemen and how stacked this class really is at defense in general. So I do think that, Cat and Yzerman are going to slip down to where I have them at 12, 13 in that range. And these are guys that definitely, if you're debating, Celebrini is gone, Dimidev's gone in your dynasties, some of these other players are going to start mixing in. And I think you're going to really want to grab, Cat and Yzerman, who just have a lot more upside. And it's pretty unlikely they're going to come out the gate and be in the NHL, but I definitely think they'll get there. I don't really think there's a whole lot else really to uncover. There's a few high risers. There's a couple of guys that I'm really going to be interested to follow, but I'm not sure if there's anything, like Trevor Connolly, Michael, Braxton, Nygaard. These are interesting prospects for sure from probably a fantasy perspective. Definitely with Nygaard, like, that guy seems absolutely electric. It's going to be interesting. The kind of the rise of Trevor Connolly as a left winger. Some of these guys that are absolutely dominant in the USHL can get into, whatever system they get into. And I believe he's going to college road. I don't remember off the top of my head, and absolutely explode. So these are other guys that are kind of tracking down the line. But yeah, definitely going to be a fun draft. And I do think like the sentiment that I feel in general is while there is a really strong top six, and I think it kind of drops off from there, I do think there's a lot of depth here. And teams that are picking in that, like I'm kind of alluding to, these 16, 17, 18 range, there's a ton of upside that still could be on the board. A lot of these guys, I think, have NHL potential. It's a deeper draft at top, but there's, as we're saying, probably one NHL guy out the gate.
Yeah, Connolly's going to Providence. So, yeah.
Providence, right. Okay, there it is.
He's an interesting cat. There's, some drama around him as a person. So
I don't know any of the drama, so
he actually has a Rochester connection. It's pretty fascinating. Just he's gotten kicked out of many schools that he played hockey at, and was not a good person to in his teens. So remains to be seen whether he's a good person.
His stock has kind of been everywhere, so that does make some level of sense. Okay. We can. Anything else
after the draft? We are going to kind of go rapid fire through some of the upcoming RFAs and UFAs that, in less than a week will be at least eligible to be signed on the open market. It looks like you listed, 5 guys that are possible trade targets, and some of those are RFAs.
None of these 5. The couple were RFAs. That's correct. Well, we'll just go right in order with how I listed them. We'll start with Nikolai Ehlers, which I think it's cooled off a bit. It's weird because the new, they kind of defended him and kind of said that he's part of the plan in Winnipeg, and yet the rumors haven't really stopped. So that's hard to know because what is a GM and a coach going to say? They're going to say, we're trading this guy. Like, you know what I mean? So I'm not really going to buy that much of it. I still think he could get moved. I just feel like if you're Winnipeg after last year, you're probably trying to get a 1-for-1 type of a deal. And people have pointed that out with other guys. So I guess we'll start with any thoughts on Ehlers in general. I mean, personally, honestly, I've heard Sabres mentioned, of course, they could use a winger and whatever, I'd take him. But I honestly would rather him just stay in Winnipeg. I'd rather that work out. I'd rather they find the correct way of playing him in this new system and with Scott Arnell. That's what I would prefer because I do think he's a ton of talent, and I'm a Winnipeg Jets guy. We all know this. So what are your thoughts? I see you're already sharing, so go right ahead.
Scott Arnell says he and Cheveldayoff have started discussing a, quote, summit of sorts to investigate their next steps in terms of using analytics and data. May 27th. I tweeted, just your classic, crossing out 2019, 2020, 21, 22, 23, 24. 2024 is going to be Nikolai Ehlers' year. And then, kid you not, let's see, can I get back to less than, 2 weeks later? On the radio, Arnell says, on Ehlers, for me as a coach, I want him, I need him. June 12th. It took 2 weeks of digging into the analytics to realize that the nerds have been correct about Nick Ehlers all along. Remains to be seen whether the first time he has a defensive zone turnover, he doesn't immediately go back to playing 13 minutes a night. But yeah, that was an interesting little thing to follow along with as we as we troll the news for during the NHL playoffs, just seeing the dribble of Ehlers information come out and then seeing those quotes was just very funny to compare against one another.
It's not at the same level, but again, this is a player who's had very similar production for the past 5 or 6 years. And it kind of feels like everyone is on the same page with Lafreniere now, that they're like, he's going to be unbelievable. He's not getting the right zone use there. Like when you put him with the right players, he absolutely explodes, and he's not getting any, power play time and this and that. And it's like, that kind of feels like Nikolai Ehlers. Like when they put him on that line with Scheifele and Connor, he explodes up the ice. He creates so much offense, and I don't know if maybe again, like I don't watch the game as much as a coach would for defensive, looks and whatnot. But man, I do not understand how he hasn't gotten a little bit more run, a little bit more time, utilizing that shot a little bit more on the other side of Kyle Connors. I don't know. I mean, I'm very interested, but again, I think my best case scenario is stay in Winnipeg. I want to see it out. I want to see what they do. I'd love to see him play the entire season, not with Alex Iafallo, who, I'd rather see him play with Kyle Connor and Mark Scheifele and Gabriel Velarde. And I know that would be breaking up that line, but 2-2, 2-2 and figure it out from there. You have prospects like Cole Perfetti who you just got to play. I don't know. I mean, that's just how I feel about it. I'd like to see it work out.
Yeah. I don't think he goes anywhere personally. So, Marty Necas. It does feel like Carolina has to make a decision about someone. Not everyone can save. They have Pesci and Brady Shea as UFAs. They have Necas as an RFA. They have Seth Jarvis as an RFA. Obviously, Jake Gensel, the main big fish on the UFA market, assuming Reinhardt's re-ups with Florida. So, yeah. Where does Necas wind up?
Yeah, I mean, again, this kind of at some point you got to pay the piper. And you said that earlier about Detroit, and while everyone was applauding and cheering and hooing and hawing at their deadline when they finally did something, it's like, okay, well, now Kuznetsov is $4 million on your cap hit. I mean, he's 3.9, but there it is. You got to do something here. Dmitry Orlov, you want to know how much his cap hit is? I'm not saying he's a useless player, but it's $7.75 billion next year. You go out and get these guys, whatever. I mean, they're players. I'm not arguing that Orlov wasn't useful at all, but now you have to expend someone, and I think it's going to be Necas. I can't imagine where it's Seth Jarvis, who it kind of really came together. I just think at 22 you could bridge deal him if you needed to. For now, Gensel, I don't know how they figure out either, but even if they figure out one of those pieces, someone's going.
Assuming they're not keeping both. They have $24 million in cap, so like they could easily fit Gensel, Jarvis, and Necas realistically. I think based on what they would command, but obviously that would get pretty tight. It does feel like Gensel's gone though; he just doesn't want to be there. And then Necas and Jarvis, you could resign them both and potentially get Brett Pesci or Shea back. Like there are options here for them. It's not like they're completely in cap hell. But it just doesn't seem like they want Marty Necas anymore. Like that's the problem. They're just kind of like, I don't know. Can we get something better for him? Maybe not, but like let's just get something different. Seems like what they're going for.
He definitely seemed like an explosive talent that a light version of Pierre-Luc Dubois maybe. Just like doesn't really have it defensively, and I don't know. It's going to be very interesting to see where this develops. I think the return isn't going to quite meet the expectation, but I do feel like he's going to get moved. So if you think he's going to get moved as well, why don't we just pick our favorite landing spot?
Yeah, there is a pipeline between Carolina and Calgary. So I'm going to go with Calgary making a splash, getting Marty Necas.
And just, really trying to be as mid as possible. I could buy that. I mean, I think the team that makes the most sense. Can Minnesota figure it out? That's the team that I kept coming back to, but the cap is just too tight, isn't it? I don't know how they figure that out. They got one more year of hell, don't they? Yeah, they got one more year of hell. That's right.
They have $6 million.
Yeah.
They're
all right. Then I'm gonna pivot to the second team that I would love to see is Nashville, because they could really use this guy, I think, to go around a second line and figure out how they could start to put together more scoring. So I'll go Nashville. They have a ton of picks.
Jacob Chikrin. Ottawa, the how do we want to say this? You were talking about Carolina going out and getting the big fish with Jake Gensel. Well, that was Ottawa two deadlines ago, getting Jake Chikrin. Had multiple years left, obviously, and doesn't seem like they're keeping him. So where does Jake Chikrin wind up?
God, I feel like this is actually the one where it's the most. I have no idea what his value is. I mean, he does seem like a pretty weird guy with his diet and everything. I don't know if that really matters, but if you ever seen how he eats like raw meat all the time and stuff, he's an interesting dude.
No.
Yeah, he just loves eating raw meat, and I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure he's probably fine. He seems. I don't know. I'm not in any of these locker rooms, but like, he's an interesting cat. He definitely does a lot of fun stuff, but I mean, the guy was a minus 30 last year. Like, I know that metric doesn't really matter that much, and yet, was Ottawa that bad that he should be that bad? I don't know. I don't know what his value. I have no idea, but I do think teams will look at a guy who is 26, turning 27 late next year, and gets a ton of shots on net, blocks a ton of shots, can play the power play, can move the puck well, and someone's going to pay something for him. I just feel like it's not going to be a contender that's going to find a way to do this, because this is the last year of his contract this year. You're going to want to resign him. And what does that look like? So I'm kind of feeling like it's going to be more of a reclamation team that bites on it, and Ottawa could use some prospects. The other kind of guy that's been circulating or kind of coming up more and more is Josh Norris as well, of like, can the Senators kind of get out of that if he's not going to be ready to go and these injuries have persisted for this long? And his contract is absolutely massive, and almost $8 million for quite a while. It's a red arrow contract on what will be formerly known as Cap Friendly, our friend. Is there a team out there that might want to look at both of them, like a Columbus, for example, or a team that really could use quite a bit? That's something that's at least in my head right now. I think at the end of the day, though, Jacob Chikrin.
Yeah, depending on the price.
I'll let you go first.
I think Pittsburgh's an interesting team here, in that they have a couple premium picks to offer. Being they have Braden Yeager, who they drafted in the first round last year. I don't even know that Jake Chikrin requires that much at this point. Like, after the year he had last year, like you were saying, can a second rounder get the job done? Like, maybe. So like, yeah, and they got assets for the Gensel deal, where they have a couple of younger prospects and a couple extra picks as a result of that deal as well, to sort of just fill in value wise. And he would fit perfectly alongside maybe not alongside Erik Karlsson, but alongside Chris Letang at this point in his career, for sure, in my opinion. And that would allow Marcus Pettersson to slide up the lineup and basically replace Ryan Graves, who was one of the worst players in the league last year. And all of a sudden, this team's looking kind of dangerous, being that they have a good top four, they have a good top six, and can they just fill in the bottom six with depth? So I think they're a team that's interesting, because they have $10 million cap space and not much else to do. So, I think Chikrin would make sense there, and also long term. Like,
I mean, the biggest rumor has definitely been the Flyers, who have absolutely no cap space. So could you go the other way on this and say that, like, the Flyers, who have eaten, Ryan Johansson's contract for nothing, they have so many just sort of movable contracts in some capacity. They're willing to move. Was it Joel Farabee, I believe, is the guy that keeps coming up? I mean, could you see a 1-for-1 deal like that, where it's like, now you're not, the Flyers want him. I see where they could use him on that blue line, honestly. That's interesting for sure. If you just did like a 1-for-1 deal there for two guys that are around the same age, making around the same amount of money, one's on a longer term deal, and kind of fits the needs. I could see that coming together, but hard to know for sure.
I don't see that personally. I don't think Philly is delusional enough to think that they're going to be a contender this year. And the calculus that most of these front offices are doing is, when are we going to get value on the contract? You're not going to get value on the contract in years 2, 3, and 4. So if you're not getting any value in year 1, I mean, contract wise, meaning you have to sign him after this year. So like, if you're not getting value out of year 1 because he's helping you win when you're supposed to be bad, like, what's the point in doing that? So I feel like it's going to be more of a win now-ish team. But
Yeah.
maybe some team out there is like, this is going to be our building block for the next 7 years. They're going to trade for him, sign him till he's 35 and just say, yeah, we have a number. Maybe we have a top pair defenseman, locked up. Maybe, but that's
you might be right. I mean, it really does feel like there's two narratives, and it's a team that, like you said, is going to look at this as a long-term situation, or a team that's kind of thinking they could get a cheap asset that, even if they're only here for 1 year, can help them now.
Who needs who needs a defenseman? I hear those Utah guys need some defensemen. Maybe bury the hatchet there and see what Ryan Smith is offering.
Probably something. Yeah, all right. Well, we have one more, I think, here, maybe two. I guess we have two. I think Marner, I can kind of skip. I think he's just going to stay, but I don't really want him to get traded anyways. I think he should just stay.
I agree.
And if he gets traded, send him to Buffalo. Buchnevich is the other name that keeps popping up. I kind of tend to think he could move. I just don't think he's overtly happy there. Maybe he's overtly again, probably incorrectly. That's the guy I want in Buffalo. I think I've come to the conclusion that Ehlers isn't going to move, but Buchnevich might. The Sabres could definitely take on that contract.
Yeah, bad news. Buchnevich has a 12-team no-trade list. I don't think there's a chance he would wait for Buffalo.
Darn it. All right.
And if you don't think Buffalo's on his list, I don't know.
I know. No, I do. Yeah. I don't know. I think he's really good. I don't know. I mean, sometimes you watch him play and he can disappear, but this is a guy that just consistently is around the 70-point mark on the St. Louis Blues. And I know the opportunity has been pretty plentiful there, and he's played with some good talent, but it just feels like this is a good contract to buy on. I think someone's going to do it. I think the Blues are going to move on, realizing that he's a UFA next year and going to walk. They get something for him now instead of nothing later.
Okay.
If it's not going to be Buffalo, like you're saying,
hear me out. Craig Berube shows up in Toronto and says, "You know who we need? We need Pavel Buchnevich." Mitch Marner. Mitch Marner traded to the Blues for Buchnevich and Torrey Krug, I could totally see Toronto doing that and just absolutely catapult. I don't know if Buchnevich's unhappiness was due to Berube or not. Kind of seems like Berube and it was like Kyrou and Thomas guys who, obviously they butted heads a lot. Yeah. I feel like Buchnevich, he kills penalties. I don't feel like that was an issue, but I could be way off base there. But just an idea that came to mind where he would make sense to fill the sort of role that Tyler Bertuzzi had this last year on the team, assuming they don't re-sign Bertuzzi, where he would work really well next to Matthews.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate that idea. I really don't, honestly. That Toronto could use him for sure to add more secondary scoring, which they, unless if they want to rely on McMahon again. But yeah, I mean, there's plenty of teams.
With John Tavares trending the way he is, I feel like Buchnevich would show up and be a primary scorer for them.
Yeah. I mean, there's. That honestly, the more I think about it, could that be like a Marty Nachos for Buchnevich situation? That feels like something that could happen to get a little bit younger in St. Louis. You can re-sign him. You kind of have control of the contract, and Carolina gets a guy that, let's see if they can re-sign him or not. They probably would want that to be a situation, but he might want to do that. And kind of said the cap situation could work out if they could get a guy on that kind of a deal. I don't know. I do think he'll move. I think, he wants, I think it's more if he wants to go to a contender. That's my guess. Which then I said the Buffalo Sabres. So that was really, really sharp of me. I just want him. I just want the guy on my team. I guess I'm not thinking rationally here, but yeah, we can quickly go to UFAs if you'd like, or we can just call it. I mean, it's been an hour 10 and we're certainly not going to be nailing any of these, but I'm down to pull up the list and go over a few.
Sure. The only thing that I wanted to do was definitely wanted to plug the newsletter thing I wrote the other week about the Tampa situation, because Tampa traded for Ryan McDonagh, which, Ryan McDonagh does not come in cheap. So I'm just trying to refresh myself. But it's on my newsletter, moods.beehive.com. So that's an easy way to just subscribe there, and it'll be emailed to you whenever I post something new. But yeah, between all the players that Tampa has on the books, they're spending something like 80% of their cap, and that does not include Stamkos. It does not include Victor Hedman, who's a free agent after next year. So I wrote about some of the options as far as what does Tampa actually do, because it does seem like McDonough's being acquired for a reason. They didn't have. It's not like he was just a luxury addition. Like, they have to sacrifice someone, whether it's Stamkos or I made a case for Victor Hedman being the guy who, they get some value. Some teams, many teams would, jump at the chance to trade multiple assets to get a 34-year-old Victor Hedman. They have Mikhail Sergachev as their number one of the future, or of the present, to be honest. He had a miserable year last year with the broken leg and the injury before the broken leg. I don't remember what that was, like a hamstring or something. But before that, he was looking like he was going to take over from Hedman, just say like, I'm the number one here now. And so I feel like that's maybe still in the cards, and this is the year to do it. You trade Hedman now, you re-sign Stamkos, your captain, and you use those assets from Hedman to go out and get more players to help, try to keep that cup window open. So to say Steven Stamkos, I feel like he's more likely to leave than he is to stay. But if he does stay, that's one way I could see things playing out. That's kind of interesting, and I think you should read about it. And then just the team that I kept coming back to for Stamkos in particular was Vegas. I don't know how they do it, but they always seem to find a way. And so I think that would be hilarious, especially if Marchessault leaving. You're showing the screen right now. Marchessault, possibly leaving. Replacing that with a Steven Stamkos sort of, sweetheart deal would be very funny.
I would agree. Very, very good plugs. We love good plugs here. I took out RFAs just to make things a little bit easier, and we'll just sort by points from last year for pending UFAs who have not been re-signed. You can take Joe Pavelski out of the mix as well, I believe. He's definitely retired. I'm not making that up, right? He retired, right?
Yeah.
So Joe Pavelski we can ignore, but he's third on the list from points. And if you want to go points per game, why don't we go points per game, actually?
Speaking of which, I think Stamkos to Dallas would also be pretty interesting. Very similar to the Vegas situation, but with Pavelski gone, it's pretty clear to me that Dallas could use that right-handed one-timer shot. Like, Sagan isn't that guy anymore. And Stamkos, I think, still can be that guy. So just move Roope Hintz to be more of a net front presence. He can transport the puck up and down the ice, but then leave it to Robertson, Heiskanen, Stamkos out wide. I think that would be a really interesting, setup as far as the power play is concerned. And I think Stamkos can still play, that he would actually contribute to the top six in Dallas if needed. He might not even need to, given the ascension of Wyatt and Stankoven. But yeah, two teams.
Well, he's number one on the list. So those are good. I think if he is not a part of Tampa, it is absolutely going to be the best cup contending team you can get the right money for. So those are great options. Is there any way? Colorado currently has cap space. They just re-signed Middlestad, so it's like, where does he fit in? It feels like it doesn't make sense unless if they're not going to really play him at center. But more than likely, I think it's almost definite. There's no Landeskog, there's no Nertushkin. It gives them a chance. They're kind of the third team I have in the mix there, although it feels difficult to get done. If we're saying that Vegas could find a way, I don't see how they couldn't. And they have some young guys. Kovalenko is a guy that we're super excited about watching next year, young player that's going to be commanding very little money to play a role. At the end of the day, I just don't know if there's all that much.
Sorry. Who was that player you cut out?
Kovalenko.
The young player?
Yeah. Okay. Well, he's 24, but.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Nikolai Kovalenko from Russia, and he played with their AHL team.
Yeah.
When he came over, he looked pretty good. I think a lot of people feel like he could be a relatively important fantasy asset to keep an eye on. I would suggest doing such. So again, I think Colorado's a third team in the mix. Not saying he has to go to the West, but I don't know. Something about him playing, I don't know. This isn't really going to help anyone by doing that. But yeah, I agree. If he moves, those are the teams. We can go to the next guy. I'm going by points per game now. The second guy is actually Patrick Kane, who had 47 points in 50 games. I mean, he's definitely earned himself another look. Rangers seem to be pretty on the radar. I don't think it's going to be all that costly to get him over more than it was probably last year. But Detroit, New York, it kind of feels like these are the teams being talked about. Is there any other team in the mix that you'd like to see Patrick Kane go to?
I feel like that's it. Like the idea that Pittsburgh does something like that, like I don't think it's Patrick Kane, but they're a team that I feel like could be in the mix for some splash edition of that ilk. I feel like they'd be better served grabbing a defenseman or trading for a defenseman, but a guy who obviously is in the same sort of age range as Sid, Gino, Letang. It's not the craziest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah. Marchessault is the next guy. I mean, that's a guy that definitely I could at least consider a Pittsburgh type of situation. Guy that had 42 goals last year just seems to be forgotten about. Playing alongside Jack Eichel certainly helped. 69 very nice points, 33 years old, probably going to be looking for a bit of a payday. Pittsburgh, honestly, do they even have cap? That's a good question.
I don't think they have enough to give Marchessault a long-term deal. Like they have 10 mil, but I just don't feel like Marchessault's the guy they would target.
Yeah, someone's gonna get. I mean, there's no way Marchessault.
Yeah, I have an idea. Boston.
Buffalo. Yeah.
Do you know how much money in cap Boston has this year?
A lot.
They have almost 22 million, and they only have to re-sign Jeremy Swayman. And then they have Grzelcyk, Shattenkirk, Forbert, Jesper Boqvist, Danton Heinen, Pat Maroon, Jason Magna, and JVR as UFAs / RFAs for Boqvist, and then just Jake DeBrusk. So they could get DeBrusk, Swayman, and still have room for a splash signing. And I do feel like Marchessault would fit in really well with that team. They'd obviously prefer a center, but I find that at least somewhat intriguing.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of have them pegged for, like, I'm thinking Arvidsson, but honestly, Marchessault fits incredibly well.
That would make sense.
Those are kind of the two guys. I very much agree. I didn't think about him for a second. And then the other, I think everyone also thinks like, well, what about Lindholm? Yeah, I mean, that's another guy that's been kind of put on that radar for a long, long time. So, do they go get that center? I assume the answer is probably yes. They'll be looking to get him. He should be a UFA as well, I believe, but I guess he could resign. He only had 12 points for them. Sheesh. Really didn't have that great of a year.
Great.
No. 12 points in 26 games. I don't know. Whatever. I think that makes a lot of sense. Pavelski's obviously gone. I think Dallas will re-sign Matt Duchene. I don't think it'll be all that costly for his production, and I think that's going to work out. Tarasenko, I just don't really care about that much. We really already down to these guys. Geesh.
It is interesting. Tarasenko, he was pretty good, and he's only 32. I don't know. It's at least interesting to think that he might actually come in as kind of a cheap option that I would be somewhat interested in if I were running an organization. Just be like, yeah, I mean, now the guy has 2 cups. You don't typically sign Russians for the ring in the room just because, whatever nationalism you want to call it. But he does sort of check all the boxes and is still a very lethal offensive player. So I find him really interesting. Does he get, a deal in the range of a Jonathan Marchessault? It just doesn't feel like they're talked about in the same way. Whereas to me, they're kind of similar.
Yeah. I mean, he's going to get a deal. I definitely think it's more of a discount, and it could be a good buy. I don't know, but
Yeah.
I just haven't really thought about him much. I guess I kind of just forget he's still out there. It kind of felt like there was a time where he was like, man, if you could somehow will him out of St. Louis, that would
Well,
be unbelievable. And now it's sort of like a few years later, we're like garbage.
Where is Samson? Why isn't he on this list?
That's a good question. I know I just sorted by UFA only, and I don't
He didn't just
understand.
sign, did he?
No, Samson
Is it
disappeared.
possible we missed something? Okay.
I whatever I sorted, because I got rid of Gensel too.
Oh yeah.
I filtered out, so I filtered out RFAs, and for some reason that also filtered out Reinhardt and Gensel. I don't know why, because all I did other than that was the amount of games they played. But whatever. We can,
okay, well,
we already talked about Gensel.
Yeah.
But
I mean, Samson's just re-signing in Florida.
Samson's re-signing in Florida. I agree. I don't know how they don't do that, which is why Tarasenko's, I think, definitely get into the market, and probably Montour, but we'll get to him. Gensel, we kind of went over him a little bit. There's landing spots that exist out there. I don't know if there's one that I'm confident over any other. I don't know. I mean, there's no team from Omaha, Nebraska, where he's from, so there's no. I don't know. I mean, is there anything you want to say on him? I mean, for landing spot wise.
No. I don't really have any thoughts.
I think he'll play in the NHL next year, certainly. Okay. Yeah. Maybe he resigns. I mean, I think, I don't think it's a foregone conclusion. So we'll say he resigns. Like I said, they moved Nate Johnson, he resigns. I'm okay with that.
I feel like this is as close to like the Brad Richards thing as we're gonna, because like I feel like he's literally just like, give me the most money. Like that's all I want. Like just give me the most money. Like and Godspeed. Like that's what he should do in my opinion. But like it means that I don't really think there's anything being considered like fit or maybe because the locations are nice, like the southern spots, but I don't think like the tax and like I just don't feel like that's gonna be, I'm pretty sure like give me the biggest number. It just seems like that's what's coming out of his camp, being leaked through, what all the insiders are saying about the situation where it's like, yeah, he's going to test the market. And like, what does test the market mean? He doesn't have any destinations in mind. He just wants someone to woo him basically. And so I don't know who's going to get their owner to say, give me the most money, but I feel like that too wins Jake Gensel, who's whoever convinces the owner. Yeah, we should give this guy, 11 mil.
I mean, you kind of mentioned it. Boston does make sense as a team that's going to make a big splash, and they're going to make it. Is Gensel the guy? I kind of feels wrong.
I feel like he'll be too expensive for a team like that.
We'll see. I agree. But what team is he? Is he truly not going to go to a contender? He's truly just going to say, "I don't care at all," and go to I mean, and then again, why would that team be the highest bidder? NHL teams are stupid, but like, is Utah going to be the highest bidder? And he's going to say, sure. They have all the cap space in the world. They have no, reason to forcibly take. Is he just going to go to Utah? You know what I mean? Like that kind of seems like not going to happen. But I don't know. I mean, he definitely is probably the most interesting case of he could literally stay in Carolina or end up on any NHL team outside of I don't know. I probably want to go to Buffalo. I get that.
And I would not be surprised. Yeah, no, exactly.
I would be very surprised. I'd be very surprised. Monahan's an interesting name. Toffoli's an interesting name. Do any of these names interest you enough to talk about? I don't know. Who really cares?
What's
Montour,
interesting is
as we're trying.
I was going to say Druin is really interesting if he doesn't re-sign in Colorado, which I feel like he would have done by now, like especially with Middlesat being signed. Like, I mean, Jonathan Druin was a player we all loved, like what now it's 7 years ago pretty much. But like he went into the wilderness and he came back and was very good alongside Nate McKinnon. Can he be like a Zach Hyman type where some team gives him, $3 million for 4 years and he just like blows up alongside, and Austin Matthews, for example? Like, is that in the range of outcomes here? I feel like the answer is yes. And so, like, I don't know. I feel like I'm becoming a Jew and Slappy all of a sudden, which is just bringing me back to 2014.
Yeah, I'm not going to become a Jordan Slappy myself, but
Okay.
he's a UFA and he's 29 and he wasn't useless last year, so someone's going to give him a chance. And I do think that team that gives him a chance is going to have the same idea you have. So sure, I mean Toronto makes sense with Austin Matthews, and I don't know, what is it? Just him, Marner, Matthews, and you just see if he can play. It just kind of feels like an odd thing that we do, where we're like, oh, this guy that is skilled that never figured it out on his own obviously just needs to play with the best players in the world and they'll be fine. And it's like, well, why him? Because he was a 4th overall pick, like why him and not another guy that I don't know. I mean, but it worked last year, so I guess who am I to judge? But yeah, that kind of stuff always seems odd to me. I guess it's just because you can get him cheap. And there clearly is something that was there at one time. I don't know. I find it interesting though.
Yeah. Anyone else you had in mind? Do you want to just say Brandon Montour and then go?
I mean, I had Stevenson listed, but who really cares all that much? He's not really a fantasy person we care about. And then, Arvidsson, I don't think I've ever been more confident in my life in anything than he is going to go to Boston and score 45 goals next year. Like that is happening.
I do love that.
Like I know it's happening, and no one can tell me it isn't happening. It will happen. And then Montour's got to be the biggest name out there. And if let's just pull up Florida quickly to kind of go over this. Like they have cap space as of today. They have 19 million, right? Well, I'm gonna have to make this smaller now. That's a lot of red and a lot of Anton Lundell's assigned. So Nick Cousins, who cares? Lomberg, who cares? Lorenz, who cares? Post is going to retire. Stenland, who really cares? Tarasenko probably goes. Reinhart, you got to resign.
Yeah.
Can you get Montour back? I think it's doable, but
yeah, the only problem with that is next year you got to re-sign Verhaeghe and Bennett, and they can do that on July 1st. So like they will know their cap situation for 2025 and beyond pretty soon. So I don't feel like Montour is possible. Reinhart right now is making what, 7.5. So he's not gonna wait. 6.5. Okay. Maybe then you can get him in the 8s. I feel like the right number for Reinhart is gonna wind up being like 9, whereas you get like 11 on the open market probably if you went right now. So I'm basically just penciling in 9 mil. That leaves 10 to re-sign Lundell and basically fill out an entire 3rd and 4th line. I just don't think that's possible to do while keeping Brandon Montour. So Montour might be the biggest player on the UFA defense market. Is that true? Just filter by defenseman here real quick. I guess you're somewhere else.
I'm not on there anymore. I went way too far, but I can filter by defenseman. Let me click it. Why is it doing this? Defense. Let's see if it completely ruins everything for some reason. Gostisbehere actually. But they've kind of said today they're going to re-sign him. Harley, but obviously RFA, but that's another guy.
Yeah.
Jersey.
I promise you he's getting re-signed.
Yeah. I think it's probably Montour. He missed a lot of time, but and came back with an injury and whatnot. But I think Montour is. 30 years old. It's like, what is he really going to be worth?
Yeah, it's either him or Shea is like the big fish out there. So
and right-hand defenseman,
that does make it interesting.
A little bit more. I'm actually very interested about what Montour is gonna need. Like he's gonna go from 3.5 to certainly not 3.5, but I don't know. I am almost trying to convince myself that they can make it work for a
Okay.
year, but would he not? He's going to want to resign long term. I think he goes somewhere.
Yeah, I think so. I just had the thought of LA to be the Drew Doughty replacement, and I just realized that I just did Brant Clark erasure, and now I feel like I belong in the LA Kings front office. So,
I'm very happy you came to the conclusion. I also find it really funny that the LA Kings, I feel like with how much of a miserable experience the PLD thing was, and they're just completely rebranding to the logo everyone wanted. And they're really, really taking their time and rolling it out slowly. And they're just like adding all these tweets to get rid of all that shit. So kudos to them at least for realizing that they had one of the worst logos in hockey and completely changing it. Here it is for them looking right now. This is just a very bad logo comparatively to where they're going. They do have cap space. They are an interesting team to make another move. Like, I know Darcy Kemper wasn't free, but certainly, they saved like 3.5.
yeah.
They could make a move, and there's really not much they need to resign other than Byfield, who is 21, and Arvidsson's going to move on. And they are a team that I feel like we've kind of forgotten about as far as making definitely could acquire any of these guys we discussed tonight. And honestly, would Montour be the craziest thing in the world? Doubt it. But Clark is coming, and Clark is certainly on the right side of the future. So, yeah, it'd be interesting. They still, in my opinion, might have a need at rate B, even with that.
If Philly figures out how to move money and can sign Montour, I mean, I will happily give up my guest room for Montour to stay with me. We'll just be best buds. I think he's married. I don't think he has a kid, but if he has a kid, who cares? I'll take care of it while he's at the games. But yeah, we'll just be grand old.
The team is Minnesota.
That's what I'm hoping for.
Absolutely. I mean, Brock Faber. I mean, you really can't say he's completely.
Yeah, Jared Spurgeon's also. He's on IR in cap friendly, so you got to consider him.
Spurgeon will be back. Yeah, I mean, there's no way they can afford him, but it's just like, I don't know. I'm just thinking back to teams that weren't atrocious that just had no defense. I mean, the Ducks. Is he going to go back to Anaheim?
No.
I don't know. I mean, no. I mean, yeah, he's not going to go back to Anaheim. But like, what team had a first power play that just needed the defenseman? That is going to maybe sign. And like that's sort of what I'm. Montreal,
Carolina.
Yeah, I mean that is certainly in the idea that they don't get Gensel.
Yeah, they don't get Gensel. They can't trade Nachos for a defenseman or something of the sort.
They let
I don't know. Just
walk.
a name that came to mind.
They bring in. Yeah, they go Orlov,
I feel like
Slavin.
I think they're more likely to re-sign Shea than Pesci anyway, so that would actually be a cool little trade out if they could manage to make that work. But yeah,
that'd be interesting.
But anything else you want to wish cast?
The Sabres to not miss the playoffs again. That's really the only thing.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't really see any big moves for them, honestly. Like I feel like though, I will say as my last thing for any Sabres fans listening, like, man, I really want them to move this pick for something. And I know that you're on the other end of that, or at least more on the other end of it than, but at some point, like, just do something. Like, I think what makes me the most upset about the Sabres right now and like the Wishcast is just like, stop being so gutless. Like, stop talking about doing something over and over again and then never doing anything and then getting to the next season and getting to the next offseason and being like, this is too hard. But this year we're really considering it. And that was that whole press conference. I'm wishcasting that the Sabres make a move and get something. And if it doesn't work out, I honestly won't even be that mad. Just don't sit on your hands again. And let 20 million in cap space, 15 million in cap space burn for nothing. Just don't do it.
Don't worry. Lindy Ruff is here, and he's going to fix the Sabres, and they're going to make the playoffs, and Lindy is my hero. So, yeah.
God, Christian Ehrhoff is still being paid. He's not on the cap, but man.
That's funny.
No, I don't know. There's really nothing. I think you know
All
what,
right.
I'm gonna say it. I think honestly at the end of the day, I think it would be Stamkos to Colorado. I think that's the idea that came to me that
Ooh.
like almost feels like it could work. It's just crazy enough to work, and like I think that would be really really cool if you could get a first power play with like Mikko, Stamkos, McKinnon. Make McKinnon stop shooting so freaking much. I know like 60 goals, but like you know what I mean? Just like I don't know. I think that would be so sick to have McCarr, McKinnon, like that. Like just like thinking that through, I was like, damn, that would be a lot of fun. Do you have one?
Yeah.
Do you have one? And then we'll close out.
I think my main wish cast is for Pittsburgh to get like a Chikrin or Stamkos, because I feel like they're a team that no one's really connecting to these guys, and I feel like they have just the right amount of money to get like one older quality player who can actually move the needle for them.
Yeah, yeah, but move the needle
All right.
where? Like I just like you think Pittsburgh is
Yeah,
a needle push away from being a contender?
I think when Sidney Crosby's playing like this, the answer is yes. In all honesty,
Okay.
I'm not ready to give up on Evgeny Malkin. Maybe he's just done, but I think Eric Carlson has another playoff run in him still. Chris Letang is still serviceable, and yeah, I mean, yeah, Sid's not going to do this
I think it's
forever,
the
but I think
defenseman.
it's
I
going to go
definitely
one more
agree with
year.
you. Yeah. I do agree.
Yeah,
They need another defenseman. They probably need another forward in the mix. They do have some cap space, and they really don't have any major guys to sign. I worry that goaltending is a train wreck, but yeah, I don't know. Well, let's close it out there.
yeah, and they
Like,
only
comment,
have
subscribe.
to, yeah, yeah, we'll talk about Pittsburgh more upcoming, I'm sure. So yeah, thank you all for tuning in. This is sort of the official closing of the 2023-24 season. So deep appreciation to everyone who has tuned in both on the podcast feed and the YouTube channel. It was a year ago at this time that I was debating transitioning to a new pod feed so that we had control over things, like the THPN allowed us to do, where we could get our feeds onto different platforms. And I'm glad I decided to do so because the THPN partnership has been a lot of fun. I got to read about Manscaped. I got to read about shaving your pubes, like just things that a little boy only dreams of in their young life. And I got to experience it this year. So thanks to everyone for continuing to support us. Hope to have a lot more in the summer, covering best ball, best puck. That contest should be dropping soon, and all sorts of season preview stuff when the time comes. So make sure you get in the Morningscape Pod Discord if you do want to talk about hockey before the hockey season starts back up again, and we kick this pod engine back into gear. In that you can get in by DMing one of us. I'm at Fake Moods on Twitter, and DJ is at DJ_Mitchell94. And that'll be the best way to get a hold of us. But we're also on Twitter at Morningscape Pod as well. DJ, anything else you want to plug before we go?
No. Thanks for all the continued support. And yeah, just keep it going. Definitely going to be more to come. Really from all angles. So just keep an eye on Twitter, and we'll just keep posting and sending out more stuff. But definitely best puck dropping soon. I was trying to get a date, but I'm not getting a date. I think it will be, I would say I'll say around the 8th of July. That's the range I think is going to be around what we're getting at.
I will hold you to it. All right. So to close this out, I would just like to note that I have 4 NHL player jerseys. I have a Jack Eichel, I have a Sam Reinhart, I have a Brandon Montour, all Cup winners. My 4th, Rasmus Dahlin, Buffalo Sabres, 2025 Stanley Cup champions. So thank you all for listening. From Doug, from Matt, from DJ, I'm Matt. Have a good offseason, everybody, and we will see you.